some ways, at some point in your life, everybody can be a lost rider. Good morning and welcome to this weekend's edition of News from the Camp House, a listening post of the Texas Sportsman Association. This weekend's edition is also brought to us by the Shaw's Bend Country Club. Country club for folks who don't have a country club. Now, you can also get these programs on the LostRiderPodcast.com. And if you don't see them there, go to YouTube and look for The Lost Rider. And you can just all kinds of ways. You don't necessarily have to get up at 6:30 on Saturday morning anymore. You can find out all this kind of outdoor news just any kind of way. All right. Now, we've got a gentleman with us again this weekend. He's been with us in the past. The Nueces River Authority Executive Director, Mr. John Byrum. John, how you doing?
Doing well, Herman. Thanks for having me on again.
I appreciate it. Now, there's good reason for this. I mean, there's, when you get to knocking heads and doing this and trying to get information, you got to go to the people that'll talk to you. And I'm very fortunate that Mr. Byrum, as well as Mr. Britton down at the Corpus Port Authority, are always willing to talk, always willing to share information. Not so. It's a little harder to get information out of some of these other folks, but these guys will tell me and try to point me in the right direction, and I really appreciate it. You there?
Yes, sir.
All right. Yeah, you're waiting for a question. All right, John.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that has come up now, I know my listeners are probably getting sick to death listening to this particular topic about desalination, but part of the problem is it turns into a hairball. I've got one entity telling me, as far as y'all are concerned, everybody's happy. The discharge, which has been the main concern up to this point, is out of sight and out of mind. It's going offshore, and to that extent, I think human mentality says it's out of sight, out of mind, and we're going to worry about the environmental impact later, which I'm here to tell you, if y'all do it the way they did strategic oil reserves, EPA said there was no environmental impact. So, kudos to y'all. You want to comment?
Yeah, yes, I do. When you take it out into the deeper water, and we're going into 37 feet of water, it's more expensive to do it that way. But the great thing about it is that it returns to the ambient level of brine almost instantly. I mean, it's a real quick exchange there between the ambient water and the brine that we're putting out, and it returns in such a quick fashion that it doesn't cause any of the environmental impacts that you would be concerned about otherwise. And they've done this type of desal for 20, 25 years around the world without any negative impacts at all.
All right, so that's here we go. Here's another reason I'm coming back to you for information. One of the other things that popped up here not too long ago, and I know it's not really your project, but I feel like you probably have, about it. So you got the South Texas Water Authority sitting down there. They're wanting to do the brackish aquifers. And on one hand, part of what we've always heard, they were trying to figure out their options to what to do with the discharge. And they were leaning towards wanting to put it back into creek. And, with caveat that this water has to go through some type of treatment before it's put back, just dumped back in the creek. And likewise with what y'all do, I talked to the guys that did the stuff at strategic oil reserves back in the 80s, and they didn't just pump it right straight back out in the Gulf. It went through some holding ponds and stuff. There was a certain amount of treatment. And it may not have been a lot of treatment, but it was some sort of treatment. Now, the hairball comes with this brackish aquifer discharge where the discharge would go to Baffin Bay. And on one hand, I assumed the problem was people were concerned about a salty discharge coming into Baffin Bay. The CCA representative told me exactly the opposite, that they were concerned the discharge would be too fresh. Baffin Bay has a certain salinity, and that's why they say it's such a great fishery. That's why they've got the great big trout out there, and that's what they want to maintain. And they said the discharge would be too fresh. But when I talk to the people on Baffin Bay, they tell me just the opposite. They tell me that there's places that were once freshwater inflow and had seagrass, and now because there is some discharge already coming into Baffin Bay, that the seagrass is dead, and it's what's coming in, what was once freshwater inflow, is no longer. So I'm getting two different stories, and it creates a hairball trying to figure out what's right.
Herman, I'm very familiar with that. We have a project that we've been working on for several years down in the Baffin Bay area, and it's along Petronella Creek, which is one of the tributaries of Baffin Bay. There's like 11 tributaries that come into Baffin Bay. Here's the issue. In a way, both sides are correct, because there has been some freshwater inflows coming into that, and that hypersaline environment of Baffin Bay is dependent on those freshwater inflows, okay?
Right.
It's a very delicate environmental balance there, though. The problem with the freshwater inflows that are coming in now into Baffin Bay is that they contain a lot of nutrients, a lot of nitrogen, a lot of phosphorus, and those kind of things have led to the decline in water quality of Baffin Bay. The research shows they developed a DNA process that identified the problem as excess nitrogen from human waste. It had nothing to do with feral hogs and that kind of stuff. It's human waste. So we were looking at trying to improve the wastewater treatment plants that have reached their life expectancy along Petronella Creek, and do a regional wastewater treatment plant that would discharge the type of water that Baffin Bay needs without the heavy nutrients, without the nitrogen and the phosphorus. And if we get that project done, I think that will help quite a bit. Now, the brine that's going from this South Texas Water Authority that was proposed for that, number one is I believe that there's a lot better way of disposing of that brine than just dumping it into Petronella Creek or one of these other creeks and letting it go.
Right.
Hey, let's spend a little money and do that the correct way is what I would be encouraging them to do. But it's not as heavy a brine as what will be discharged from a seawater deal.
Right.
In most cases. Some cases it is as heavy, but in this particular case, I don't think it would be as heavy. But still, I think it would be better if they looked at a different way of discharging that and, avoid discharging that into Baffin Bay altogether.
Right. Well, I think I assume things. I never assumed that it would be straight off discharge. I assumed it would go through some type of a water treatment. I could be totally wrong in my assumptions, but that's kind of the way I thought. I said, well, surely they're not going to just dump it in there. And, okay, the other idea is, out of sight, out of mind type of thing, that's where everybody's happy dumping things down these reinjection wells. Well, sooner or later that comes to an end, because if you look out in the Permian Basin and the issue with the orphan wells and these wells that are puking up frack water, you know, it don't last. You can't do that forever.
Yeah, the solution to pollution is not pollution, and we've got to deal with it in environmentally sensitive ways, and there are ways to do that. It was my understanding that there was going to be no further treatment to that brine at all. They were just going to discharge it into the creek and let it run into Baffin Bay.
Huh.
And I worry about that, being it's such a delicate environmental balance
right.
down there. I'm worried about it taking that balance away. So, you know, I would encourage them to find a different way. It's a great project, and it's a project that's much needed. I would just invite or encourage them to go a different way with the brine.
All right. All right. I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break and thank the folks who let us come on here every Saturday morning. We'll be right back.